I remember the sound before I remember the sight, and I wish it was the other way around, because that sound still wakes me up some nights, still grabs my chest before my mind even figures out why. It wasn't barking, it wasn't growling, it was my dog screaming, that high, tearing sound no animal should ever have to make. And in that instant, I knew something was wrong in a way that felt like it was wired right into my bones. I dropped what I was doing without thinking, like my body was already moving before my brain caught up, and I just ran. My ranch sits a little outside of Red Mesa County, out past where the neat lawns end and the dust starts to feel honest, past where the houses bunch together like they're afraid of being alone. My grandparents raised cattle on that land before my dad, and I took it on after him, not because anybody made me, but because it felt like a promise I didn't have to say out loud. Everything out there feels earned. The wind that hits your face in the morning, the quiet, even the fences, especially the fences, because those aren't decoration, those are boundaries. And boundaries, at least where I'm from, matter. So I'm sprinting past the barn, heart pounding, boots kicking dirt, and I come around the corner expecting maybe a snake, maybe she got her leg caught, maybe anything normal, anything that fits in the world I know, and instead I see Daisy on the ground by the fence line, legs scrambling but not finding strength, one paw clawing at nothing, and standing over her like he belonged there was a man in a dark vest with big white letters that said Community Standards Enforcement like that somehow. Meant he owned the air, he was breathing. And here's the part that still makes my jaw clench when I say it out loud. He wasn't panicked, he wasn't startled, he wasn't apologizing. He looked irritated, like my injured dog was an inconvenience on his to-do list, like bleeding wasn't a reason to stop and think about what you were doing. Now before this day, there was already a story behind that fence, and I didn't realize how long it had been building until it all boiled over. See, a development had crept its way toward my land over the past decade, one cul-de-sac at a time, one smiling brochure at a time. They brought rules with them, committees with matching polos, meetings about paint colors and lawn heights, and eventually a homeowners association that thought its reach was a whole lot longer than it really was. And at the head of it was a woman named Linda Caro, the kind of person who smiles like a customer service poster but talks like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Linda tried to bring me under her umbrella more than once. At first it sounded polite, like community alignment and shared expectations, but the tone changed fast when she realized my land, my house, my animals, none of them answered to her clipboard. I had deeds older than her neighborhood, county records etched into dusty drawers before she ever learned the word committee, and all of it proved the same thing. My ranch wasn't hers to manage. She didn't like that word, no. She especially didn't like it when it came with proof. So for months, little tensions built. Notes slipped into my mailbox I never signed up for. Friendly suggestions that didn't feel friendly. Mentions that my fencing looked non-compliant with neighborhood aesthetics. Comments about Daisy being an unpredictable livestock guardian in a suburban-adjacent environment. Yeah, suburban-adjacent. That's a real phrase she used. I kept it professional. Posted fresh, no trespassing signs. Sent formal notices. Made it crystal clear that nobody from that association had any business crossing my fence line. And yet here we were. Daisy's head moved when she heard my voice, but her body didn't follow, and that does something to a person. It rearranges something inside you that doesn't quite go back the same. The man turned toward me slow, like I'd interrupted him rearranging his living room instead of catching him inside my property, lying herding my dog. His face had that look some people get when they've spent too long thinking a plastic badge makes them bulletproof. Calm, superior, detached. Your animal is in violation, he said, like he was reading from script. He gestured at Daisy like she was a trash bin tipped over in the wind. Aggressive behavior. Non-compliant presence on HOA adjacent territory. HOA adjacent. That phrase alone almost made me laugh if everything else hadn't been burning inside me. You climbed a posted fence, I told him. My voice came out steadier than I expected. You're trespassing, and you put your hands on my dog. He puffed his chest a little, like a rooster in borrowed feathers. I'm authorized to enforce standards, he said. There it was. The confidence of someone who's never had to test whether their authority is real. Daisy tried to stand again and failed, and that soft, broken sound she made right then was the moment something inside me stopped being patient, stopped being diplomatic, stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding that could be talked away. It wasn't about paperwork anymore. It wasn't about community guidelines. It was about a line that had been crossed. After months of warning, after months of pretending respect was optional, I stepped between him and Daisy, not fast, not frantic, just deliberate, like I wanted him to really see the choice he'd made. Dirt under my boots, wind catching the sign on the fence, my dog breathing in these shallow, trembling pulls behind me. He lifted a radio like it was supposed to intimidate me. "I'm escalating this," he said. "My supervisor said you'd be difficult." And in that moment, standing out there in the dust and sunlight, it hit me that this wasn't some guy who wandered too far. This was planned, sent, encouraged. And if someone sends trouble to your door long enough, eventually trouble walks in. He said that line like it was supposed to settle the world, like invoking some invisible authority would make me nod and step aside while he rewrote reality to fit whatever script Linda handed him. I remember staring at that radio, this cheap plastic thing with a belt clip, and thinking how ridiculous it was that a grown man believed it made him official, like a kid with a toy badge who'd never grown out of the act. The wind tugged at his vest, that bold community standards enforcement stitched across the front like it meant more than it did, and for a second everything got strangely quiet, like even the air was waiting to see what came next. "Do not take another step," I told him when he shifted forward again, and I meant it in that simple, heavy way that doesn't need shouting. I wasn't playing intimidation. I wasn't trying to scare him. I was laying down the last line in the sand. Daisy tried to growl behind me and managed something halfway there, broken and soft, and I swear I felt it run straight through me like someone struck a wire inside my chest. He smirked, actually smirked. "You people always think property makes you invincible," he said. "You think rules are suggestions just because you've been here longer. Times change. Communities evolve. You adapt. Or you get brought up to standard." That right there told me everything. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about concern. This was about power wearing a polite face and finally getting tired of pretending. This was resentment wrapped in policy language. This was Linda finding someone who liked pushing people around and telling him it was noble work. "You need to walk away," I said quietly. "Right now. You need to walk back over that fence, and you need to remember you are on someone else's land." He laughed. Not a big laugh. Just that sharp, dismissive kind people do when they think they've already won. "You won't do anything," he said. "Guys like you never do. You bark. You yell. And when someone calls your bluff, you fold." He took that final step. The next seconds feel slow in memory and fast in reality, like they layered on top of each other. The world narrowed down to breathing and distance and consequences. I drew, steady, clean, not dramatic, not shaking, because this was the moment every warning, every sign, every polite conversation had been trying to prevent. I leveled and told him to stop one last time. This time, the confidence drained out of his face just a notch, not gone, just shaken enough to reveal he hadn't truly considered this could happen. "You cannot threaten me," he said, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "I am not threatening you," I replied. "I'm telling you what comes next if you keep coming forward." But he had that look people get when pride hijacks good sense, when ego gets louder than self-preservation. Maybe he thought his vest would protect him like some kind of shield. Maybe he thought Linda would sweep in and fix it all afterward. Maybe he just couldn't imagine being wrong. He moved again. The gunshots were loud. Of course they were. They always are, but what I remember more is the silence afterward, the shocked emptiness of sound as he hit the dirt, like the world took a breath it did not want to take. He went down hard near the fence he had no right to cross, the radio skidding out of his hand, all that fake authority pouring right out of him along with the bravery that was never really his to begin with. Daisy startled and then went still. My hands were steady. My heart not so much. I kept distance. I kept control. I called 911. My voice sounded detached, like it belonged to someone older, someone who had lived this once before and archived the steps for later use. "Armed trespasser shot. My dog is injured. Send deputies. Send medical." They did not hesitate. Sirens rose somewhere beyond the pasture like the sound of the world, rushing in to judge whatever had just happened. The neighbors gathered the way neighbors do when something explodes the quiet. Phones up, whispering. Some shocked, some curious, some, I swear, entertained. I placed the gun down when I saw the first cruiser crest the hill. Hands visible, calm, still, because when you know where you stand, you do not have to run from it. The deputies did their job. They did it fast and exact. Commands, angles, pressure on wounds. Someone went to Daisy immediately, calling in a vet like it was second nature. Another found the man's identification, or at least the version of it he'd been trying to sell the world. Fake badge, fake seal, laminate so cheap it curled at the edges. Criminal impersonation is an ugly phrase when it's no longer hypothetical. One of the deputies, an older guy I'd seen around town for years, looked up at me with a kind of tired disappointment. Not at me, not exactly, more like at the stupidity of the situation he was now part of. Walk me through it, he said. So I did. Start to finish. Fence. Signs. Injuries. Warnings. Movement. Shots. They documented everything. Every footprint. Every drop. Every angle from every perspective. The fence line with its bright letters that could not be mistaken. Daisy's injuries. The vest. The radio. The emails they pulled faster than I thought possible. Eventually, evidence is an unforgiving storyteller. It does not care about intentions. It cares about facts. And then, like some twisted punchline showing up late, Linda arrived. She came in fast, tires spitting gravel. Like urgency could rewrite reality if she showed up breathless enough. She was already talking before she got all the way out of the car, already gesturing, already framing the narrative like this was a meeting she could control if she just spoke confidently enough. This is unnecessary, she kept saying. This is liability. This is escalation beyond protocol. And then she saw the uniforms, the body cams, the long faces of people who weren't playing committee theater. Her confidence wilted. Not gone, just shrinking. She tried to pull out her familiar phrases. Community safety, temporary enforcement, concern. But the deputies already had more than her voice. They had her written words, the ones people don't expect to be read out loud with handcuffs waiting quietly nearby. Handle it, she had written. Document noncompliance if he resists. Animal is dangerous. He thinks he's untouchable. The officer read them calmly, clearly. Each line another brick stacking into a wall she was rapidly running out of room to stand behind. Her face went pale in waves, anger trying to fight its way through fear and losing. And here's the thing that sticks with me. None of this had to happen. This wasn't inevitable. This was built brick by people who thought pressure was cheaper than respect, who thought rights could be nudged away if you surrounded them with enough paperwork and smug confidence. This was ego trying to play sheriff in a place it had no jurisdiction. They arrested her when the last piece clicked. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. Just the slow, dawning realization settling into her bones that the authority she'd wrapped herself in didn't stretch this far. Not even close, and a pair of handcuffs that probably felt impossibly real and impossibly heavy. The man on the ground was still breathing when they loaded him up. Daisy was stabilized and sent to emergency care. The neighbors eventually drifted back to their curated lawns and quiet kitchens, already rehearsing the story they'd tell their friends later. Me? I just stood there for a while after it all slowed down, staring at that sign on the fence, the same one that had been there yesterday, the same one that meant exactly what it said, just suddenly treated like it mattered again. And if you think that's the end of it, no. That was just the point where everything stopped being a situation and became consequences. Because investigations do not end at the scene. They ripple. They uncover. They decide. The investigation stretched on in that slow, grinding way real life prefers over the neat endings movies promise. Weeks turned into paperwork, into statements, into legal language cold enough to make even the most emotional day feel like it happened to someone else. The man who came onto my land survived, and life has a strange way of making survival more complicated than finality. He woke up to a world that no longer believed his costume, no longer bowed to the authority he pretended to have. He wasn't a symbol anymore, or an instrument of somebody else's will. He was just a guy who trespassed, hurt a dog, and discovered real life doesn't bend for ego. He faced charges, real ones, with real names that carry real weight. Trespass, assault, animal cruelty, impersonating an officer. Somewhere between court dates and hospital checks, the swagger drained out of him completely. That vest didn't look like power anymore. It looked like evidence. Linda fought longer, of course she did. People like her don't believe consequences apply until the judge's voice is echoing off the wood paneling and the courtroom is suddenly very, very quiet. She tried to frame it as concern, tried to frame it as community duty, tried to wrap cruelty in polite language. But eventually the truth stands there with its arms crossed and asks if you're done dressing it up yet. Conspiracy, fraud, solicitation, liability stacked on top of arrogance until even she couldn't climb over it. The HOA that once held clipboard confidence fell apart in the aftermath. Turns out a lot of people liked rules until rules meant responsibility. Committees dissolved. Policies crumbled. Homeowners who once whispered support from behind blinds suddenly remembered they never really liked Linda that much anyway. The county stepped in and locked boundaries down in print so hard even future egos would have trouble pretending otherwise. My land was formally excluded, explicitly protected from any repeat attempts to own what was never theirs. And Daisy, she healed in that stubborn, beautiful way dogs do. Scar along her head, a little slower some mornings, a little more careful with rough ground, but still loyal, still steady, still choosing to stay as close to me as possible, like she understood that we walked through something together and came out different, maybe a little harder, maybe a little more aware that peace isn't guaranteed just because you mind your own business. But here's the part one don't say loud at cookouts, the part that only shows up when the day gets quiet and the sun drops low and the fence line turns into a silhouette against the sky. It changed me too. Not in the loud, dramatic way people might assume, but in quiet ways that sneak up on you. Trust got smaller. Patience got shorter. And I find myself double-checking the locks on a life I used to think didn't need them. Boundaries used to just be wood and wire. Now they feel like something living I have to tend, like if I don't, the world will start pressing inward again, smiling politely while it erases what it doesn't respect. You know what else surprised me? The community reaction. Some folks call me a hero. Some said I was reckless. Some argued online like they'd been there witnessing every breath. People always find certainty when it's not their fingerprints on the moment. But the truth lives somewhere messy, somewhere between survival instinct and legal language, between a barking dog in pain and a world that loves turning real events into debate fodder. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like a man standing in the unavoidable center of a storm someone else built and shoved into my yard. One afternoon, long after courtrooms and headlines stopped echoing, I stood by that same fence with Daisy sitting at my heel, wind rolling through the grass, quiet finally sounding like quiet again. The new sign on the post wasn't bigger. It wasn't louder. It was just respected. And maybe that's all anybody really wants when they say this land is mine, whether it's a literal field or just the simple space of their own life. Respect. Not fear, not dominance. Just recognition that some lines exist for a reason and crossing them isn't brave. It's foolish. A neighbor walked by that day. Not to argue. Not to stare. He just nodded. And that nod felt more honest than any policy meeting ever could. So yeah, everything ended, but it didn't tie itself into a neat little bow. Life rarely does. Justice happened, but justice doesn't erase scars. It just makes sure they mean something. Boundaries held, but they needed to be defended, and defending something changes you, whether you admit it or not. And maybe this is where you come in, because this isn't just a story about one ranch, one HOA, one bad decision that spiraled. It's about community. It's about ego. It's about how far control should reach before it stops being order and starts being invasion. It's about where we draw the line between we live together and you don't own me. Now I'll leave you with this because I genuinely want to know, if someone crossed into your life the way they crossed my fence, if someone believed paperwork gave them permission to trample what matters to you, how far would you go to protect it? Where do you stand on what happened? Was it justified? Was it too far? Or was it the inevitable end of a fight that never should have started? Tell me in the comments. Argue, agree, disagree. Just be honest. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing on their side of the fence right now, hoping the world still understands what a boundary really means.